Welcome to Behind the Audition podcast with your host, Curt Hilton. Listen in on interviews with voiceovers, filmmakers, producers, animators, and much more. Curt, a voice actor himself, will give insider tips to the business, talk with guests about how they got into the business, and be sure to stay tuned to the end of the podcast when he challenges his guests with a pop-up audition. Now it's time for Behind the Audition podcast. Here's Curt Hilton.
Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Audition podcast. On this episode, I spoke to the amazing voice actor, Dee Alvis. We talked about how he got into the industry, and you don't want to miss that story. We also talked about what he bought to get him started in the voiceover industry. We talked about networking and marketing with some of the greats in the industry and how he started his amazing brand, Tattoo VO. Plus, you don't want to miss this audition challenge. It is epic. So sit back and enjoy another episode of Behind the Audition podcast. And coming to the show, one of my favorite promo VOs of all time, the one, the only, Dee Alvis. Welcome to Behind the Audition podcast.
Hey, how's it going, Curt?
It's going good. You know, I'm not going to lie. Before I got the show started, my computer wanted to go back to 1994 and not load up. And so we got to have a conversation pre-recording. So again, I apologize for that process.
Windows.
Yeah. So my friends with Macs are winning the battle. They're always pushing me to get the Mac computer. I have a Mac iPhone, but I don't have a Mac computer. I guess I'll have to upgrade, right?
The last Mac I had was a G4, and that's actually when I was first using digital audio editing, back when Adobe Audition was called Cool Edit. And
oh my gosh,
I love that. I love the G4, and there was that, like that really bulbous screen thing where with the old Macs, where that was the computer itself, which was unique. You didn't have like a separate tower like you do with most PCs. And again, that was late 90s. So that was pretty far ahead of its time.
Oh my gosh, you showed my age. Cool Edit. I remember Cool Edit. That in SoundForge was the first.
SoundForge, yes. Like a lot of my bands, we'd use SoundForge for recording.
Oh my gosh. That's when the first system I used when I first got into voiceover. My wife was a TV anchor out in Montrose, Colorado, and I was doing a recording for the TV station there, and the gentleman there taught me SoundForge. I went from Cool Edit to SoundForge, and I just thought that was like the neatest thing ever.
If I remember correctly, SoundForge was like much more colorful, right? Like, felt like it was very same thing with Pro Tools. Which is funny because I learned everything on Pro Tools, and then in the radio days they cheaped out and were like, we're getting rid of Pro Tools and now we're gonna use Cool Edit. And I was like, man, I just mastered Pro Tools, well, at least for radio purposes and stuff, and basic stuff. I'd mastered Pro Tools, and now it's like, okay, we're scaling back and doing Cool Edit. So that was kind of once you like got used to Pro Tools and having to go back to Cool Edit, at least back then, it was worlds apart. So. Now, I prefer Cool Edit, Adobe Audition versus Pro Tools. I mean, Pro Tools is great for music stuff. I just feel like it's needlessly complicated for what we do for the most part.
Absolutely.
And much more expensive. So
yeah.
Well, and as you know, Curt, one of the biggest things of being a voice actor is knowing how to use things in a budget.
Hey, you know what? No shame in the game for Audacity either. You know what I mean? If it works,
no, not at all.
And that's the thing. And I'm super excited to have you on here because, you have that really cool promo voice, and, you can hear your voice out there. Let's jump in the DeLorean and go back and, talk about when you first got into voiceover. When did you finally, realize this is what I want to do? When did you do that?
It's funny. It's one of those things where I never really knew what voiceover was, going back to when I would use voice for I was captivated by sports broadcasts and the local radio stations. So in my more formative years, I was living in the DC area, and like Aero 97 or Aero 90, was it Aero? Yeah, Aero 94.7, 98 Rock out of Baltimore, and DC 101, obviously out of DC, and then the legendary WHFS when it was still like an independent station. And I thought it was cool to hear these people just talking and playing music or whatever, and I hang on their every word. I felt a connection to the, it got to be like the local DJs were your friends through this magical box called a radio. And so I think that's when I was first interested in using my voice as a possible career. I really wanted to do sportscasting. Like, again, growing up in the 80s and early 90s without cable, my sports fix would be 11:30 Sunday nights, George Michael Sports Machine. So, which was locally done. George Michael was a local legend in DC, but his show was syndicated in hundreds of markets. So that, you look at Sports Center and basically everything that ESPN and NFL Network or any sports network does, it all was tailored after George Michael Sports Machine. So got to meet him, oddly enough, and get some advice from him when I was just after I graduated high school. So, which was amazing for an 18-year-old kid to, when I think about people meeting heroes and things like that, and through later in my career, I got to meet a lot of famous people and interview a lot of famous people, things like that. But I always, when people ask me, like, what was the most memorable? And that's always one of the first things that comes to mind. And I'm like, it had nothing to do with my career at the time, but it was instrumental in how my career was shaped. So that's where I got into broadcasting. And then through broadcasting, it was kind of like voiceover was just part of it. Mm-hmm. So, doing commercials and doing some of the promos and things like that. So, and we had the news station, the rock station. I actually originally started at a AAA station that ended up becoming an NPR affiliate. So that's where I first cut my teeth. And that's where I would say technically my first voiceover gig was when I was at Towson University. I was the on hold voice. So like when you called the school and were put on hold, there's Dee telling you about what's going on. This week, the Tigers are going to be taking on, whatever. And in CAA basketball, so how there's a lot of times when you call a business and you put on hold.
Yeah.
It's not just like, your call is very important to us. A lot of businesses, if you do IVR, which thankfully I still get a lot of IVR gigs.
Yeah.
They're basically just advertisements while you're on hold, or just announcements telling you what's going on. So that was me. And I can't lie, I nerded out when so at that point I wasn't a student. I'd graduated and all that. The university owned the license to the NPR affiliate. So everything was done out of the university. So it was on their campus and at Towson University in Baltimore. And basically I would call sometimes because I just geeked out about it. I was like, I'm just going to call the school to hear myself. Like such a dork. But I thought it was cool. And that's when I was like, now, granted, they didn't pay me for this. At that point, I was 20, I think I was 20 years old or 21 years old.
Yeah.
I didn't know that things like that were services that people paid for. So after getting my $40,000 and change, they also got free work out of me. Thanks to you. Go Tigers.
That is awesome.
I still love my alma mater. I just like to joke about that because basically it was like, hey, do you want to do this? And I said, sure. Yeah. Not knowing that it was something I could have asked for money.
Right.
But live and learn.
Absolutely. And so you start a brand, the Tattoo VO. How did that name come about?
So Corey Disson is my marketing guy. Corey is an amazing resource for the voiceover community, as you know, I'm sure. Corey, we discussed getting down to like the nitty gritty. I used to be Voice Chameleon was my original brand thing. So when I started out, I didn't know. Like when I launched this whole thing was I'd planned on it. Like I always wanted to do it. At that point, radio was going downhill in 2008, 2009. Everything was going downhill because of the economy, right? The Great Recession, part 2, or was that part 1? I think we're still in it. But it had been brought to my attention at that point that people make a good living just having a home studio and doing VO. Now, when I looked into it at that point, 2009, I basically, where ISDN ruled everything, I did not have the money to put together what would have been a competitive studio at that time. For what I was told was like what you needed to compete. Like, so between the ISDN and all the other equipment, we were looking at, at least a $10,000 startup cost. So I looked into getting a loan for that, and I couldn't get a loan for that. Oddly enough, I got a loan for $60,000
Mm-hmm.
to buy into this club that I ended up partnering up with this guy back in 2009 because radio hours were getting cut. My marketing job, I was a copywriter for a marketing company, and they, when the recession hits, they were like, we're scaling, but they basically like axed our entire department. And then my hours got cut back at the station. So like it was like a 4-day span, because I think I got it was Thursday I found out about the marketing thing. And then that following Monday, I was told that, we're scaling back your hours because if you have this many hours, we have to give you benefits, blah, 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 blah. So we're doing this too. Basically, if outside of the morning show, I think everybody got kind of screwed at that point. So it was tough. And so rather than do the voiceover thing, I got into this business where I was a rock club and I DJ'd and I booked bands and did all that stuff. And it was fun. It was, I had just hit 30 and I was like, this is cool. I'm going to be, one of my best friends called me Johnny Dangerously.
I love that movie.
With Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
That was like my new nickname. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, you're a club owner now. And I'm like, that's really a minor part of the character of Johnny Dangerously. But I was like, I'll take it. It's a cool character. Yeah. So, and it was fun, but at the same time, like it wasn't owning a business like that. It's tough and money wasn't there. And, I put out the money for the loan and then paying that back. And after expenses and things like that, I was like, man, this wasn't a great idea. I'm putting in a lot of hours and not making any profit really. So sure, I was having fun. Fun doesn't lead to a very good future. Especially I knew, and again, I was still in radio, but I knew the writing was on the wall with what radio is now.
Yeah. Now we were just talking about that, about going back to work. You and I were talking about, people, the economy where people are just going to feel happy working from home. And like you said, recording, that people are doing shows from home and you don't really, your favorite jocks on the radio anymore. You don't really hear that. It sounds pre-recorded.
Voice tracking is what they call it. And so, I launched Voice Chameleon, which was the way I branded it. Cause I didn't know what my niche was going to be. I thought it'd be easy to just get a bunch of commercial work, right? Like I think that's where a lot of people are sold on. It's
right.
Oh yeah. You get thousands of dollars for a 10-minute session doing, I'm like, yeah, that can happen.
Right.
If you book it.
Right.
But guess what? There are there's thousands of voice actors out there, but there's like hundreds of really top-notch people where they have the training, they have the acting chops, and they have the magnificent studios. So, your odds of getting those on a regular basis aren't very good. So I didn't know what my niche was going to be, and that's why I did Voice Chameleon, because I figured like it'd be clever to be like, oh, I'm a jack of all trades. But really, as I found out in the voiceover industry, they hate that. Now, they want you to be a jack of all trades, but heaven forbid you actually present yourself as that, because they don't like it when you say your niche is 5 things. It's,
one.
Yeah. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know if I have right now, as I sit here today, if I say what my niche is based on what I book most, it's character work. And that's something I didn't even, I guess as a kid, I like doing funny voices and stuff, but as we know, voiceover really isn't funny voices and stuff. So there is a market for that, but not like it used to be. Even, the modern cartoons and animated shows, they're very much just regular sounding folks. So it's much more about the acting than anything else. The whole thing with Tattoo VO was just, I knew I needed to kind of revamp. I had a plan in 2019 to just, okay, I got to get better demos done and work with proper, because I did. I coming from an audio producer background too, my demos were all jobs I had done. So like my commercial demo was actual commercials I did that I chopped up and put into a demo. So, everybody will tell you, or a lot of industry folks will tell you, you never make your own demos. And I'm like, it worked for me and it's worked for a lot of other people I know.
Yeah.
Now I understand when you're getting to the agency level, and even some of these demo producers I had talked to that were like, yeah, your demo's okay, but it's not really that, it's not up to snuff. And like, that's funny, because all these companies that hired me And, I had at the time, it was H Gregg when they were still like the biggest electronics place.
Mm-hmm.
It was a regional spot I did for McDonald's, like for the entire Northeast. National thing I did for Jiffy Lube. National thing I did for, not national, Dunkin' Donuts was regional. Jiffy Lube was national. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, major brands that were all on my demo. And yeah, so when I was kind of working the freelance route, that was very impressive to a lot of clients and potential clients. But as far as like the elite end of the VO industry, where, the people who are going to get awards or the big agencies and stuff like that, that's not what they wanted. So I was like, okay. And again, I didn't know. I kind of was learning as I went, doing a lot of just research online, doing a lot of webinars, things like that. And finally, going into 2019, I said, look, I need to I've been kind of lone wolfing this thing for too long.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was networking through LinkedIn, was where I met so many wonderful resources in the VO community, from producers to other talents who are just amazing and are willing to share their knowledge and help you. And then coaches of all kinds, so that's how I met Corey. And we revamped the whole thing and wanted to make it something kind of personal, and tattoos, I'm covered in them. And I like the idea of leaving an indelible mark.
Yeah.
And I think with branding too,
I like
right?
that.
Because we talk about branding, that's what tattoos essentially are. They were the, as opposed to an actual brand, meaning like a hot iron in the shape of something that gets put on your skin, which is what a lot of, that's part of goes back to some history of different cultures, including here in America, where a rite of passage, if you will, or whatever it was, or you were part of a crew or a group or whatever. And so I always thought the idea of branding in the marketing sense, and then tying that in with tattoos being a brand of their own, I loved the concept that Corey came up with. So we rolled with that, and he had the designs and all that. And then I kind of reshifted all my content to align with that as well.
Right.
So, I do my Tuesdays ink positive, because I'm trying to just enlighten people with something positive to think positive, but I made it ink positive. And I used to do this thing called Flash Fridays, because Flash is the artwork. If you go to a tattoo parlor and there's just the stuff on the walls where people point out and they say, yeah, I want that. Those are called flash pieces. So
yeah, I like that.
So then of course, like when I put out client reviews and stuff, it's nice ink, which is again a slang term for, hey, you got a great tattoo. It's nice ink. So, made it all part of that. And also just to stand out. And I realized that's one of the big things is, because there's so many people able to do this now, again, because when I ended up doing this, I started off with like a $300 budget. So, I had like a $30 mic, a $100 interface. And I mean, I already had the computer and all that, so it wasn't a big deal. I had like 3 laptops, one I used for DJing, one I used for my business, my previous business, and then one that was for personal use. So yeah, so I was using Audacity, and I had this Behringer little interface / mixer, and this literally was like a $30 mic. And and then the rest of the money on what I thought was soundproofing, but was not really soundproofing. So 2019 was, got hooked up with Chad Erickson, who was always very helpful, even before I worked with him. He was just a guy I reached out to through LinkedIn, asking him about, so I knew he did a lot of promo work and stuff and imaging. And so I just wanted to pick his brain, and he was nice enough, and he didn't even have I Need a Demo at that time when we were first talking. But when it was time to cut a demo, proper demo,
right.
I talked to a few producers, and he was the one I rolled with. So, and I'm very happy, because sure enough, like within a couple weeks of having my commercial demo with Chad, like I got a whole bunch of new clients. And, then I did my radio imaging demo through him, and ended up on, House Management's roster. So Chad was great. Corey teaching me how to do social media marketing and direct marketing specifically for VO, because I was always good with sales, and marketing was always part of my background. Like I even did, because in between radio and doing this, I was doing insurance sales, and I was doing basically like if you're in debt, I was one of those companies that would go to bat for you and like, here, you got $10,000 in debt, I can get it resolved for 5,000.
Wow.
So I worked for one of those companies. So I'd learned a lot of stuff over the years, and of course, going back to when I was a copywriter in my early 20s, and working for a marketing firm. So like I had all the kind of training and knowledge in different ways. It was a matter of how to put it together specifically for the VO industry and having a successful VO career. And that's where Corey was so instrumental and still is, because to this day, even though I'm not doing his program per se, like I'm not paying him as my guy anymore, he's still such an amazing resource where I mean, and talk about quick to respond, man. If I send Corey an email, I will get a response within 5 minutes. If I send Corey a text, I will get a response within 5 minutes, like during the daytime. It's amazing. So shout out to him.
Absolutely not. And, with your branding and you brought up the niche, a lot of us out there will, we'll think, what is our niche? We'll try 15, 16 different types of voiceover out there that they have. And there's many voice actors out there that will, try different freelance sites to figure out what their niche is. You have that voice that, it's made for this or that. You chose promo. No,
I didn't. I promo is really not where I even book much.
Really?
Like, promo is
okay.
I mean, I do like, I guess you could. Some of it's promo. It's like a lot of the video game trailers, because I do a lot of video game trailers and promos in that regard. But not so much like I don't do like TV promos.
Oh no. I'm saying like you have that, like that, like with the brand.
Yeah, that's where I'd love to, and I mean, I as far along as I've come in a couple of years, I'm still in a lot of ways I won't say the infancy, but maybe the teenage years of my career. Because again, it was 2019 that I decided to do this the right way, I guess you would say, and not be lone wolf and Mr. Rebel. Because I really did. Because I thought, I was like, why would any of these people want to help me when they're coming? They're trying to get the same nut I am.
Yeah, and
and it's like, oh, well, there's as many talents as there are out there. There's more jobs than can build that can be more jobs than can be fulfilled. So now, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of snakes in the grass, and especially with some of the people who prey on newer talent. Yeah, because they just want their get your money. Right. These ideas of, you just take a couple lessons with me for a few $100 and.
You have made this the easiest interview of all time. I just got to say, you have made this so easy for me.
Let me ask you something. What would be your niche?
Mine?
If you had to.
I would love to do commercials, just commercials, like the everyday Joe commercials. I thought I wanted to be in doing video game characters. There's part of me still wants to do it, but everybody wants to do that. And, talking to Mark Scott, some other VOs, everybody, like he said it perfectly. Everybody wants that sexy project. I would just love to do commercials every day.
And that's it. And see, for me, you just touched on the bottom line issue, right?
Yeah.
If you're booking commercial work consistently, that's how you're making.
Right. I do e-learnings. Yeah, I do e-learnings probably 90% of my work. E-learning, narration videos.
That used to be where my bread got buttered, and I don't know what happened. Maybe it's because through coaching and training to do more character stuff and more commercial stuff.
Right.
Maybe I lost whatever my appeal was to the e-learning industry.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm too too emotive or too whatever it is. And because I used to be, that's where most of my money was made. And, it's not the best paying and it's not the most glamorous, but it's consistent, because all you need is a few e-learning clients that put out content on a regular basis.
But it's so funny. You literally went through all my questions and you told the stories. It's like you knew these were coming out, didn't you?
No, isn't that crazy? Like, that's why I think it's funny when you just vibe with somebody and have this conversation.
We talked 15 minutes prior to this too. It was so awesome.
Yeah.
It's like we've known each other for 15 years.
And I think that's a cool thing, is right. Like, again, we as voice actors were isolated, right? Because we've been working from home, prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so we were already we were learning how to socialize. And it's weird to me, because I always thought it was like having social media friends. Like, I always thought that was BS.
Yeah.
And then I realized like, oh, dude, actually, like in my career, I feel like now, like some of the best friendships I have at 42 years old are with people that I've never actually met.
Oh man, that's
Like there's so
cool.
many of these people, like, other talents and people in the VO industry who I've become very close to. We talk all the time, we text each other, we call each other, we'll have
Mm-hmm.
Zoom meetings, just like a happy hour kind of thing, whatever. I'm amazed at how I guess the world has evolved into that. And I feel like a jerk for being so cynical about it in the past. And I guess in this time of isolation and all that too, like a lot of people just like, like how do
Right.
I socialize? Because depending on where you are and what your feelings are about the current situation, you might not want to ever leave your house. So
Well, no, I mean, I've had a great time talking with you today and having I feel like we just picked up the phone and started talking. It didn't feel like, an interview, and that's what's so great. And now it's time to have some fun. It's time for the audition challenge. Are you ready for this one? Yeah, I sent something fun to you in your chat, and I wrote this because I'm all about the nostalgic commercials and promos and stuff. And I wrote some just for you. I think you're gonna
oh
get
my
a kick
God,
out of it. You just read it.
I was not expecting what it was.
See, I've talked
I
to
would
you,
go
but I
to
don't
this,
know
by
you.
the way.
See, that's what I'm saying.
I
I know
would go-
you, and we've talked a couple times, and this is great.
Yeah, and it's
So whenever
my
you're
God.
ready, take it away.
All right. I'm just picturing the commercial, like the
when they
actual
hear it.
visuals
Oh,
for
yeah.
this, and I can't stop laughing. This Sunday, the world will be mesmerized by the sounds of Thundercats on Ice. Get your tickets today to see what all the roar is about. Thundercats on Ice.
See, and
Wow.
if I don't make it in the VO world, I can write copy for comedy.
Dude, that's
right?
great. We should actually put that together. Like,
Yeah, for sure. I love 80s stuff, and I follow a lot of nostalgic 80s Instagram and TikTok because like we talked before the show, there's nothing like things like when we were kids, things were a lot cooler than they are nowadays. And the VO world is a lot different than it was back in the day. They go into the studios, record, and I always see promos of them, like the guy from ABC. I forgot, I went blank. Ernie.
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
Ernie something anyway, and he's a big name. Sorry, I forgot his name, but watching his videos were so much fun.
Yeah, I find that so there's definitely like Mark Ryder is somebody I want to give a shout out to. He's an amazing talent, and you want to talk about promo guy, that's the promo guy right there. Mark is, I mean, he's several networks and tons of sports stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's the voice for the Tampa Bay Lightning promos. He does a lot of NHL stuff. He does stuff for the NFL, UFC. I mean, again, tons of television networks, radio imaging, all that. Like Mark is fantastic, and he's coaching now, and not just coaching. He's also doing like not just teaching you how to do copy, but he'll also teach you like how to run your VO business as well, which is great to hear from somebody who kind of came up from a similar background because he was a broadcaster as well. So taking that, radio background and turning it into a very highly successful VO career. So I think about folks like him, and when I see them in action, it's amazing how they can just flip that switch. So I'm sure that's exactly what you're talking about. Some of these other videos where, and again, some of the people I've gotten to know when I talk to them, like on the phone or in a Zoom thing, versus when we get into doing reads, and how they're able to just flip that switch. As I'm talking to you now, this is how I would speak in a conversation. And to a lot of people, they feel like, oh, that's being announcery. Like, no, that's just the way I talk. So,
well, I enjoy it. I think it's amazing. I think what you're doing is great. We're gonna have to do a part 2 and get you back on here. And,
cool, man.
And thank you today for taking the time to come on the show. And Dee Alvis, you rock, man. And we'll definitely do a part 2. Thanks for being on the Audition podcast. Absolutely, man. I appreciate it.
Keep shining.
Absolutely.
For more information about Dee Alvis, check him out on tattoovo.com.
Thanks for listening in on Behind the Audition podcast, made possible by Hilton Productions. If you need a male or female voiceover, contact us at hiltonproductions.com. Hilton Productions, let our voices do the selling.